There's lots of people that did not believe there's any such thing as Indigenous law, but when you're in the communities, you understand that people are aspiring to live in a peaceful way.
Tonight, the original laws of this land have finally made their way into a law degree program.
Will the Prime Minister commit today to having his full cabinet sit with Indigenous knowledge keepers to learn what free, prior, informed consent really means?
Indigenous rights remain a topic of debate in the House of Commons.
Finally, when I started to sing, I guess something else comes to me.
And renowned artist and director Alanis Obomsawin debuts a reissue of her album, Bush Lady. Good evening, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. After a quiet day Wednesday, NDP Member of Parliament Romeo Saganash got up today in question period. On Tuesday, Saganash had to apologize to Parliament for dropping an F-bomb. But he avoided a repeat performance of that as he continued to push the Liberals and the Prime Minister on the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion.
But he is determined to push ahead with the pipeline opposed by First Nations. Mr. Speaker, reconciliation is not a talking point. It requires true understanding. Will the Prime Minister commit today to having his full cabinet sit with Indigenous knowledge keepers to learn what free, prior, informed consent really means?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I thank the member for his question and his deep passion for this file, one that we all care deeply about as Canadians and we need to continue to work on. We recognize that there is much to do in terms of reconciliation, and that's why we're moving forward in consultation in supporting the UN Declaration of Indigenous Peoples. We know that we will continue to work and listen to all voices, those in favour of projects and those opposed to projects, to make sure we work together to get the right path for Canada.
For Abitibi Bay, James Nunavik, EU.
Wow, Mr. Speaker, this is becoming a file-to-file relationship.
Still with question period, NDP MP Charlie Angus asked two questions about mercury poisoning in Grassy Narrows First Nation in Ontario. His second question appeared to catch Indigenous Services Minister Jane Philpott off guard.
Mr. Speaker, I was pretty shaken up to see the visible impacts of Minamata disease on the children, who don't just carry it in their bodies. 80% of these children are suffering permanent cognitive damage, and yet this government has cut all the special education funding to the school. There's not a school board in this country that would deny special ed funding to children with such needs. So will the Prime Minister explain to the people of Grassy Narrows why he refuses to spend a dime helping the children who will carry the impacts of this disease for their whole lives?
Minister of Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's always important that we raise the issues of Grassy Narrows and that we all stand behind supporting this community. As I said already, we have supported them in working towards the building of a new treatment centre. I'm surprised to hear what the member is saying about special education, and I will look into that immediately. We have made it very clear that we will support the needs of children through Jordan's Principle and other mechanisms, and I will absolutely ensure that that happens.
Meanwhile, the province of Ontario will be making an announcement in Grassy Narrows tomorrow afternoon. We want to hear what you think. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. Find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptn news. You can also follow APTN News on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for all the latest Indigenous news. Questions remain over why Terry Lynn McClintock, the woman convicted of killing an 8-year-old girl, was transferred from a maximum security prison in Ontario to a minimum security healing lodge on the Niigaaniit First Nation in Saskatchewan. Today, that question turned into a heated back and forth on the House floor.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister knows that Tory Stafford's killer was behind razor wire and bars and is now in a condo. And he also knows that he does have the ability. Let me read to him what the Act actually says. It says, the Governor and Council may appoint a person to be known as the Commissioner of Corrections, who, under the direction of the Minister, has the control and management of the service and all matters connected with the service. Will he use the authority he has to put the killer back behind bars?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, I will let Canadians determine who is playing word games with talks of condos. The facts of the matter are clear, Mr. Speaker. In 2014, under those Conservatives, the offender in question was moved from maximum security to medium security, and that individual remains in medium security to this very day.
To Saskatchewan now, where the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations is looking for a new leader. The election campaign kicked off this week amid controversy and infighting. The organization will be without a chief for the next 30 days while the election plays out. Police were called to FSIN headquarters in Saskatoon earlier this week, and the Youth Council then weighed in. In a release, they said, quote, "For years, the productivity and governance of FSIN has been in question. We must come together to restructure our nationhood and to be a more effective organization." Youth Council is no longer commenting. Neither is the FSIN itself, which represents 74 First Nations in the province. There will be more on this story shortly on our website, aptnnews.ca. The University of Victoria in British Columbia has launched a new Indigenous Law degree. The program is the first of its kind in Canada. APTN's Lori Hamlin has the story.
Elders, politicians, scholars and students packed into First People's House at the University of Victoria on Tuesday to launch the world's first Indigenous Law degree.
We're doing things in an old way, which is a new way, using Indigenous people's own law to be able to answer the questions that face us. And those laws come from stories and language and patterns of behavior that we've had through the years, and we can bring that to deal with family law issues and environmental issues and other questions that are facing us.
Graduates of the four-year program will receive 2 professional degrees, one in Canadian common law and one in Indigenous legal orders.
There's lots of people that did not believe there's any such thing as Indigenous law, but when you're in the communities, you understand that people are aspiring to live in a peaceful way that has order attached to that.
Students will learn laws from the Anishinaabe, Gitxsan and Cree. Professor John Burrows says field trips to Indigenous communities and out on the land will play a crucial role in the students' education.
The students are learning in ways that we call trans-systemic or across legal traditions. So part of Anishinaabe constitutionalism is teaching students how to read the earth or understand what is happening in that space and then drawing analogies from that into the human world.
Carolyn Bellew is one of 26 students in the new program. She says she hopes the resurgence of Indigenous law will help with reconciliation.
Being a Sahwetan woman going forward with this, I think it will help improve the relations between Indigenous and non-Indigenous, and I think that's something really special.
It is imperative that truth and reconciliation is in everything that we do.
The Truth and Reconciliation Commission's Call to Action number 50 asks governments to fund Indigenous law institutes. The province budgeted $2.5 million over 2 years to help support the program. Lori Hamlin, APTN National News, Victoria.
Quebec is headed to the polls for a provincial election on Monday, but have Indigenous issues been addressed during the campaign? More on that after the break. Here's a look at Friday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. 12 with rain for St. John's, 14 and rain in Charlottetown. Sunny skies and 12 above for Nain, 13 under the sun in Cartwright, 17 and sunny for Montreal, 15 under the sun in Quebec City, 18 and sunny for Toronto, 18 with rain for London, 11 and rain for Thunder Bay, 8 and rain for Wawa. In northern Manitoba, 0 with a rain-snow mix for Puckatawagan, same for the Paw with a high of 3 above. 9 and rain for Winnipeg and Gimli, 5 under the sun in Brandon. In Saskatchewan, 7 under sunny skies in North Battleford, Saskatoon, and in Regina. 7 with sunny skies for Meadow Lake, +4 in Buffalo Narrows. Welcome back. Quebecers are getting ready for their provincial election this coming Monday. Ghislain Picard, AFN Regional Chief for Quebec and Labrador, outlined his concerns about Indigenous issues in a letter he sent to all major provincial party leaders. Melissa Ridgen spoke to him about that earlier when he was at the recent Assembly of First Nations meeting in Gatineau.
Hi, thanks for joining us, Regional Chief Picard. In the letter addressed to the leaders of the Quebec political parties, what exactly are you asking of the next premier?
Well, I think there definitely needs to be a reset in terms of the political relationship between First Nations and the next provincial government. And I guess the irony into all of this is the fact that every single election for the past 20 years, we needed to make that point to political parties, but yet in 2018 we have to send this reminder once again that our issues cannot be avoided. So all parties need to address them, especially the one, I guess, hoping to form the next government. So this is what we're saying, but we are also seeking a number of commitments on key issues. UN DRIP is one big piece, obviously. If Canada is able to adopt a law that will see the policies and laws in this country reflect the principles of the UN DRIP, then we don't see why Quebec couldn't do the same thing. The other issue, and it's another big piece, is the economy of First Nations. We're talking about labor, we're talking about access to lands and resources. So it's certainly an area of concern for all First Nations in the province of Quebec. And as well, the whole issue of discrimination and racism in the institutions that are part of that are overlooked by the province. And we have a commission in place right now conducting hearings all the way to December of this year, and then they'll issue a report. So we're asking governments to keep an open eye in terms of the conclusions and recommendations, and because definitely will be front and center in terms of applying whatever recommendations we see fit in the report. So these are a number of key issues that we feel are certainly should be on the radar of any party wanting to form the next government, and not forgetting the fact that public safety is very high on the radar of our leadership. So that's another area where we'll be wanting the next government to sit down quickly, or demanding that the next government and the cabinet sit down with our leadership within 100 days of the next of the vote on October 1st. So
I understand that there's 5 points in this letter that you have sent to these political parties. You've outlined some of them. Is there anything that you haven't told us so far that's in that letter that you're asking?
No, the economy, safety of our peoples, the UN DRIP, access to lands and resources, the whole issue of, making sure that Quebec institutions, so that would mean all departments, be more sensitive to the whole, specifics of our nations, their culture, their way of life. I think all of that needs to be reflected in the way the province deals with our peoples. You said that
you've brought these points up in previous elections. How hopeful are you that this time anybody will listen?
Well, we have 2 weeks. There are 2 weeks remaining in the current election before the vote, and we've been faced with adversity before, and we don't back down that easy. So we will continue to put pressure on the government, on the parties, I would say, in the next 2 weeks, to make sure that those issues come to the forefront. And we have the first debate scheduled tomorrow night and we're trying to put pressure on Radio Canada as well to address at least one of those questions be of concern to First Nations. So we will take whatever means are necessary to be heard, definitely.
Well, we will stay tuned and see how successful you are this time around. Thank you so much, Regional Chief Picard, for joining me.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
One of the most celebrated Indigenous documentary filmmakers is re-releasing her album. More from Alanis Obomsawin after this short break.
I'm Kent Driscoll in Iqaluit. Brian Taglick and Pitsula Ashuna did what they were supposed to. They got an education. They got jobs. And now they're homeless, living in a tent outside Nunavut's Legislative Assembly with 2 small children.
And as we walked here, I was in tears. I was scared with my daughters, and I said, am I going to sleep outside with my children? How's it gone?
Their story, coming soon on APTN National News.
Here's the rest of Friday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. 9 under sunny skies for Peace River, 8 above and sunny in Grand Prairie. Rain and 10 in Medicine Hat, sunny skies and 8 above for Edmonton. Beautiful day on the west coast, 21 and sunny for Victoria and Campbell River, 20 under the sun for Bella Coola, 15 and sunny in Smithers, 16 for Prince Rupert, 9 in Fort Nelson, 10 above and sunny skies for Dawson, 9 and sunny in Mayo, 12 for Whitehorse, plus 7 in Fort Liard and Trout Lake under the sun, plus 4 for Fort Simpson. Minus 4 and snow in Sax Harbor, minus 2 and snow for Paulatuck, 0 in Colville Lake, minus 2 for Repulse Bay and Cambridge Bay where snow is expected, 0 for Chesterfield, minus 3 for Glulik, minus 8 and snow in Resolute. Welcome back. Alanis Obomsawin is one of Canada's foremost Indigenous documentary filmmakers. For decades, she fought for justice and gave Indigenous peoples a voice. Now it's her voice that people will hear when she performs songs from her 1988 album, Bush Lady. Danielle Rochette has more.
Lady. This was at Le Gesu Festival in 2017 in Utrecht, Netherlands. Obomsawin performed her 1980 album, Bush Lady, live for the very first time, 30 years after its release.
Until the time I started to sing, I was, oh my God, I didn't know. You almost feel you don't have a voice. It's so uncomfortable. And finally, when I started to sing, I guess something else comes to me, and I was very touched by how welcome I was.
Few people know that Obomsawin made her professional debut as a singer and storyteller in the 60s before joining the National Film Board in 1967. Her album recently caught the attention of Radwan Gazi Moune, musician and co-curator of Le Gesu Festival, when he got his hands on an original copy.
One of my picks was Alanis to come perform Bush Lady. I thought that would be a wonderful idea, that she would do it for the first time on stage, and that it would be in a context that is so far removed from home, and to present it to a new audience.
Moune was really impressed by her performance.
Yeah, she did it, and she shone like a star. She was amazing. She made the entire room cry. I'm not even joking. Cry. Everybody was crying.
In June 2018, Constellation Records released a remastered version of Bush Lady. One song on the album focused on despair and homelessness. Obomsawin thinks it is still very relevant nowadays, but there is a hope.
There has been quite a few success, but there's still a lot of people that are totally lost, and we have to somehow all of us have to help, everybody, making them feel right, making them feel that they belong, that they're beautiful, that they're good people. They have no clue about that. And I walk around with the sorrows of my race.
After a live performance at the Montreal Pop Festival on September 28th, Obomsawin will be putting the final touches on a 50-second documentary. Daniel Rochette, APTN National News, Montreal.
What an absolute treasure she is. Looking forward to getting that on vinyl. A pair of Saskatchewan entrepreneurs have opened a store in the Qu'Appelle Valley with the hopes of helping their neighbors and turning a profit. The store will feature items from local artists, but will also hold a special significance in the name that hangs above the door. Creason Achkate has the story.
She's a mother and daughter, or cookum.
Ever since Marla Denemy was a little girl, she dreamed of owning her own store.
When I would come from the reserve and we'd come to town, I would just look at the stores and I used to say, someday I'm going to own a store in Fort Qu'Appelle.
And now her dream is a reality. Marla is the co-owner of Becky's Place, and her business partners are her husband Claude and her son Richard.
Everyone's amazed.
The store is located in Fort Qu'Appelle's Broadway Street. It was once Buck's, but will soon reflect its current title, Becky's Place.
And this little store has been a gem in Fort Qu'Appelle for many years.
From arts and crafts, various flavors of tea, and materials you can only find here, Becky's Place has just about everything. Marla is keeping the previous store owner's products while incorporating her own ideas.
We're going to slowly evolve into more arts, more crafts and creations.
I am an interprovincial journeyman tradesman, and it's vastly different than what I'm used to doing in life. Like, I'm used to seeing a job done in one day, but being a merchant is actually a lifetime's job.
The idea for the store's name is in honor of their late daughter Becky, who passed away 14 years ago.
She was the artsy girl in our family. She painted, she knitted, she crocheted, she sewed. So she was the artsy girl, so she would love this store.
She'd probably be the one behind the till today. And so we feel it's like bringing all our children back together and ourselves as a family. So we're quite happy with the name.
Marla also has a goal to help local artists from all backgrounds to sell their creations here.
We've got many talented people who live in Fort Qu'Appelle, who make bird houses, who do cross-stitch.
The Denemys hope Becky's Place will be a store for everyone, and they have big dreams to keep adding to the store so that it will be a one-of-a-kind shopping experience in the heart of the Treaty 4 area. Creason Achkate, CTV News, Fort Qu'Appelle.
Great looking place. That's your APTN National News for this Thursday. For much more, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a great night. Melissa Ridgen will be back here with you tomorrow.